Let's talk about something a lot of people carry quietly. Some people don't hate people. They don't avoid friendships on purpose. They actually want connection. They just struggle to make friends, not in a dramatic way, more like a slow, confusing way. You meet people, you talk, you're friendly. You show up, and somehow nothing sticks. Everyone else seems to fall into groups, inside jokes, plans, memories, and you're just kind of there on the outside, watching it happen. And the worst part is, you can't really explain why. It's not like you're rude. You listen, you care, you're thoughtful. But friendships feel harder for you than they seem to be for everyone else. You might be the person who's always cool with anyone, but rarely close to anyone. The one who blends in easily, but doesn't get invited deeper. Group conversations drain you, not because you're shy, but because you're constantly reading the room, choosing your words, making sure you don't say the wrong thing. You replay conversations afterward, wondering if you came off weird, boring, too quiet, or too much. And over time, you start assuming it must be something about you, like you're missing some social gene everyone else got. Maybe you've told yourself, I'm just bad at friendships, or I don't really click with people, or worse, people don't really choose me. And even when you're surrounded by people, there's this low-level loneliness that doesn't go away. You're included, but not anchored, known, but not deeply understood. And it gets exhausting pretending that doesn't hurt. What makes it harder is watching how easy it looks for others. They meet once, and suddenly they're close. They talk effortlessly. They build friendships without overthinking every interaction. And you're left wondering how something that feels so natural to others feels so complicated to you. You start shrinking your expectations. You tell yourself you don't need many friends anyway. You act like it doesn't matter, but deep down, it does. And if this sounds familiar, this video isn't here to tell you how to fix yourself. It's not here to give you social tips or confidence hack. It's here to explain something most people never talk about. Why some people struggle to make friends, even when they care deeply about connection. Because this struggle isn't random, and it's definitely not because you're broken. It usually doesn't show up in some big, obvious way. It shows up in patterns. You meet people, you talk, you're polite, you're friendly, you even laugh at the right moments. On the surface, everything looks fine, but somehow the connection never goes deeper. You're the person who's easy to get along with, but hard to really know. Group settings feel especially weird. You're there, but you don't feel in. You listen more than you speak, not because you don't have things to say, but because you're constantly checking the temperature of the room. You're watching reactions, timing your words, making sure you don't overshare or say something that lands wrong. Small talk drains you faster than it should, and when conversations end, you replay them in your head, wondering if you sounded awkward, boring, or invisible. You might notice that friendships for you feel one-sided in a quiet way. You're often the one reaching out, checking in, remembering details. But when you stop putting in effort, things fade. Invites slow down, messages stop, and you start asking yourself why it's so hard for people to stick. You see others form friendships effortlessly, inside jokes, spontaneous plans, late-night calls, and you can't help but wonder what you're missing. It's not that you don't care. You care a lot, sometimes too much. You feel things deeply, which makes you cautious. You don't jump into closeness easily, and by the time you're ready, people have already moved on. Even when you do make friends, there's often a sense of distance. You feel like you're always one layer away from being fully comfortable. You don't relax completely. You're aware of how you're being perceived. And that constant self-monitoring makes connection feel like work instead of something natural. Over time, you might start choosing solitude over social plans, not because you hate people, but because being alone feels simpler, less draining, less disappointing. At least when you're alone, you don't feel that quiet rejection of being overlooked or forgotten. What hurts the most is that this struggle is hard to explain. From the outside, you don't look lonely. You're functional. You're social enough. People assume you're fine. But inside, there's this persistent feeling of not being chosen, not being anchored anywhere. You want real connection, but you don't know how to get there without feeling exposed or exhausted. And after a while, you stop asking what's wrong with the world and start asking what's wrong with you. You tell yourself maybe you're just not built for friendships. Maybe you're too quiet, too intense, too different. And that thought sticks with you longer than you'd like to admit. At this point, most people turn that confusion inward. They stop asking why friendships feel hard and start telling themselves stories about what must be wrong with them. You hear it in your own head. Maybe I'm boring. Maybe I don't have a real personality. Maybe I'm just bad at people. You compare yourself to others and assume they have some natural social skill you missed out on. And slowly, without realizing it, you turn a pattern into an identity. You don't just struggle to make friends. You start believing you're the kind of person who can't. But that conclusion is way too harsh. And honestly, it's wrong. Struggling to make friends isn't proof that you lack social ability. It's not evidence that you're broken, immature, or emotionally behind. In a lot of cases, it's a sign that you take connection seriously. You don't jump into closeness lightly. You don't bond just to fill space. You pay attention. You notice shifts in tone. You feel the weight of words. And because of that, you don't move casually through relationships the way others might. What looks like ease for them often feels like risk for you. Here's the part most people never consider. If you truly didn't care about connection, this wouldn't hurt. You wouldn't overthink conversations. You wouldn't feel that quiet sting when plans fall through. You wouldn't want deeper friendships in the first place. The fact that this struggle exists tells you something important. Your capacity for connection is there. It's just guarded. And guarded doesn't mean closed off. It means selective. A lot of people are taught, directly or indirectly, that being emotionally open comes with consequences. Maybe you were misunderstood before. Maybe you felt rejected when you finally showed up as yourself. Maybe you learned that being quiet made you invisible, but being expressive made you vulnerable. Over time, your system adapts. It becomes careful. It waits for safety before it reaches out. And when safety doesn't feel obvious, it pulls back. So no, this isn't about being bad at friends. It's about having a nervous system that learned to protect itself around people. And once you see that, the shame starts to loosen. This stops being a personal failure and starts making sense as a response. You weren't missing something everyone else had. You were responding to something they didn't have to deal with. To really understand why making friends feels hard for some people, you have to look past social skills and start looking at how the nervous system works in connection. Friendship isn't just about talking well or being likable. It's about feeling safe enough to relax around someone. And for some people, that safety doesn't come automatically. Their nervous system stays slightly alert in social situations, even when nothing is obviously wrong. They're not panicking, they're not anxious in a loud way, they're just on, watching reaction, tracking energy shifts, noticing when a joke lands or doesn't, picking up on small changes in tone or body language. And that constant self-monitoring makes connection feel heavy before it ever feels fun. A lot of this comes from past experiences, even small ones that didn't seem like a big deal at the time. Being left out, being misunderstood, feeling like you said the wrong thing and couldn't take it back. Over time, your system learns that social closeness carries risk, not danger, but emotional cost. So instead of moving freely through friendships, you move carefully. You don't assume acceptance. You wait for proof, and while other people bond quickly through shared moments, you're still checking whether it's safe to fully show up. This is why group settings are often the hardest. Groups are unpredictable. Multiple personalities, unspoken rules, shifting dynamics. For a nervous system that prioritizes safety, that's a lot to process at once. So you stay on the edge. You observe. You contribute when it feels appropriate, but you rarely relax into the moment. And because friendship grows fastest when people are unguarded, this self-protection can unintentionally slow everything down. Not because you're distant, but because your system is trying to avoid another subtle rejection it doesn't want to repeat. There's also a big difference between people who seek stimulation in connection and people who seek regulation. Some people feel energized by fast bonding, constant interaction, and emotional intensity. Others feel regulated by consistency, depth, and predictability. If you fall into the second group, casual friendships can feel unsatisfying or even exhausting. You're not looking for surface-level connection. You're looking for something real, something steady. And those kinds of bonds take time. They don't form in loud rooms or quick exchanges. So when friendships feel hard, it's not because you're lacking something socially. It's because your system is wired to move slowly, carefully, and intentionally through connection. And in a world that rewards fast bonding and constant social availability that can make you feel out of place, even when there's nothing wrong with how you connect, here's where the way you look at this starts to change. Instead of asking, why am I so bad at making friends? The question becomes, what kind of connection does my system actually respond to? Because struggling to make friends doesn't automatically mean you're socially incapable. A lot of the time, it means you're not wired for fast, casual bonding. You don't open up on autopilot. You don't attach just because you're in the same space as someone. You're selective, even if you never chose to be. Your system waits for something deeper than vibes or convenience. And in a world where friendships are often built quickly and casually, that can make you feel like you're always a step behind. What looks like avoidance from the outside is often discernment on the inside. You're not pulling away because you don't care. You're holding back because connection costs you something. Emotional effort, mental energy, vulnerability. You feel everything that happens in a relationship, even the small stuff, so you don't jump in lightly. That doesn't make you closed off. It means you're tuned in. And being tuned in comes with weight. You notice when something feels off. You sense when you're not fully welcome. You can't just ignore that and push through it, the way some people do. This is also why being alone can start to feel easier than being social. Not because you prefer isolation, but because solitude doesn't require you to monitor yourself. You don't have to perform. You don't have to be on. Your nervous system finally gets a break from evaluating every interaction. And once you experience that kind of relief, of course your system leans toward it. That's not giving up on friendship. That's choosing regulation over constant effort. When you see it this way, the story shifts. You're not someone who struggles because you lack social value. You're someone who struggles because you don't do shallow connection well. You're built for fewer, deeper bonds, the kind that take time, safety, and consistency to form. And those don't always show up quickly, especially not in loud environments, busy schedules, or surface-level interactions. So this isn't about forcing yourself to be more social or pushing past your limits. It's about recognizing that your pace isn't wrong, it's just different. And once you stop measuring yourself against people who connect fast and start respecting how you connect, the pressure eases. You're not late to friendship. You're just wired to enter it slowly, when it actually feels real. So maybe the truth isn't that you're bad at making friends. Maybe the truth is that you learned to take connection seriously. Somewhere along the way, your system figured out that closeness isn't casual. It's something that deserves care, timing, and safety. And that learning stuck with you. It followed you into classrooms, workplaces, groups, conversations. While others bonded quickly, you waited. While others assumed acceptance, you looked for signs of it. Not because you were insecure, but because you were paying attention. That kind of awareness can feel like a disadvantage in a fast, social world, but it's not a flaw. It's a form of depth. You didn't fail at friendship. You adapted to it. You learned how to protect yourself by staying observant, emotionally prepared, and cautious about where you place your energy. That doesn't disappear just because you grow up or want things to be different. It becomes part of how you move through relationships. And when people don't meet you at that level of care, connection feels forced instead of natural. That's not rejection, it's mismatch. This phase you're in isn't permanent. It's not a life sentence of loneliness. It's a pause, a stretch of time where your system is learning what safe connection actually feels like. And for people like you, that safety usually shows up slowly, quietly, through consistency, not through instant chemistry or loud belonging. When it does, it doesn't feel dramatic. It feels calm, familiar, like you don't have to explain yourself anymore. So if you're someone who struggles to make friends, that doesn't mean you're disconnected from people. It means you're wired for friendships that actually mean something, the kind that don't require you to perform, chase, or constantly prove your place. The kind that meet you where you are instead of asking you to change your pace. And those connections do happen. They just don't happen on everyone else's timeline. Sometimes the people who struggle the most with friendship aren't behind. They're just waiting for something real. And that's not a weakness, that's integrity. And if this video put words to something you felt for a long time, you're probably not the only one. This channel exists for people who think deeply, feel quietly, and don't always see themselves reflected in loud conversations. So if you want more psychology like this, calm, honest, and judgment-free, you already know what to do.